My name is Samantha Wilson, and I'm 34 years old. For 8 years, I believed I had the perfect marriage with James, my 36-year-old marketing executive husband. That was until last month, when I hosted a dinner party while James was supposedly on a business trip to Chicago. My brother Andrew arrived late, apologizing profusely. "Sorry I'm late, Sam. You won't believe this, but my friend just sent me photos from his restaurant in Miami." "Isn't James supposed to be in Chicago?" "Because he's definitely in Miami with some blonde woman." Before I continue with my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you want to hear more stories about how I rebuilt my life after betrayal. James and I met at my college roommate's wedding 8 years ago. I was a bridesmaid, and he was friends with the groom. We locked eyes across the dance floor during the reception, and it felt like one of those movie moments where everything else fades into the background. He asked me to dance, and we spent the entire night talking. By the end of the evening, I'd given him my number, something I rarely did. Our first date was at a small Italian restaurant in Boston. James was charming, attentive, and seemed genuinely interested in my career as an elementary school teacher. He spoke passionately about his work in marketing, his ambitions, and his love for travel. 2 years of dating followed, filled with weekend getaways, family holidays, and building what I thought was a solid foundation for our future. The proposal came during a trip to Cape Cod. He arranged a private sunset beach dinner and got down on one knee just as the sky turned brilliant shades of pink and orange. I cried, said yes, and we were married 6 months later in a beautiful ceremony with 150 of our closest friends and family. We settled into a comfortable life in suburban Boston. We bought a charming colonial-style house with a fenced yard, thinking someday we'd fill it with children. I continued teaching 3rd grade at a local elementary school, and James climbed the corporate ladder at his marketing firm. From the outside, we were the picture-perfect couple that friends envied. The first few years of marriage were everything I'd hoped for. We traveled during summers when I was off from school, hosted dinner parties, joined a local tennis club, and built a life that seemed blessed in every way. James was supportive when I went through a difficult period after my grandmother passed away, and I stood by him through a stressful company restructuring. We were partners, or so I thought. Looking back now, I can see the signs that something was changing, but at the time, I brushed them aside. About a year ago, James started working late more frequently. At first, it was once or twice a week, but it gradually increased to 3 or 4 nights. When I expressed concern about not seeing him enough, he assured me it was temporary. His team was pitching to major new clients, and the extra hours would pay off with a promotion. The business trips increased too. Previously, James traveled maybe once every 2 months, but suddenly he was flying somewhere almost every other week. Chicago, New York, Atlanta, Denver, his schedule was packed with meetings across the country. Our communication during these trips dwindled from frequent texts and nightly FaceTime calls to brief messages and excuses about back-to-back meetings. Our intimacy suffered. We went from being a couple who couldn't keep their hands off each other to barely kissing goodbye in the mornings. When we did make love, it felt mechanical, like James was going through the motions. I tried talking to him about it, but he blamed stress and exhaustion from work. Then there were the new hobbies. James suddenly developed an interest in golf, something he'd previously mocked as a waste of perfectly good walking. He joined an exclusive country club with steep membership fees, explaining that it was important for networking. He bought top-of-the-line clubs, designer golf attire, and spent entire Saturdays away at the course. His phone became a fortress. James, who once left his phone lying around without a second thought, now kept it password protected and within arm's reach at all times. He started taking calls in another room or stepping outside, claiming he didn't want to bore me with work talk. If I came near while he was texting, he'd quickly turn the screen away or put the phone down. I rationalized all of this. James had recently been promoted to senior marketing director, a position with significantly more responsibility. Of course he was busy and stressed. Of course networking was important. Of course he needed new outlets to relax. I trusted him completely and never once suspected he might be unfaithful. My family adored James. My younger brother Andrew, who runs a successful software company, initially gave James the typical protective brother interrogation when we started dating, but they quickly became friends, occasionally meeting for beers or basketball games. My sister Emma, happily married with 2 adorable children, often commented on how James and I were relationship goals. My parents, Robert and Patricia, who'd been married for 40 years, welcomed James into the family and treated him like a son. My best friend Lily, whom I'd known since our freshman year of college, was the only one who occasionally raised concerns. As a divorce attorney, she'd seen countless marriages dissolve after similar patterns of behavior. "I'm not saying anything's wrong," she told me over coffee one day, "but these changes are worth paying attention to." I dismissed her worries as occupational paranoia. When your job is handling divorces, you probably start seeing potential infidelity everywhere. 2 weeks before that fateful family dinner, James and I celebrated our anniversary at an upscale restaurant downtown. He seemed distracted during the meal, checking his phone repeatedly despite my gentle reminder that it was our special night. Over dessert, he dropped the news about his upcoming trip. "I'll be in Chicago next week," he said, reaching for my hand across the table. "Big potential client. If we land this account, it could mean a significant bonus." "How long will you be gone?" I asked, trying to hide my disappointment. We'd tentatively planned to spend the weekend at a bed and breakfast in Vermont. "Just 4 days," he promised. "I'll make it up to you when I get back." I smiled and squeezed his hand. "Bring me back some deep dish pizza," I joked, pushing aside my disappointment. After all, his success was our success, right? Little did I know that this Chicago trip would be the thread that, when pulled, would unravel the entire fabric of our marriage. The family dinner had been planned weeks in advance. With James away, I thought it would be a perfect opportunity to spend quality time with my parents, siblings, and Lily, who was practically family anyway. I prepared my signature lasagna, set the dining room table with our wedding china, and opened several bottles of wine. My parents arrived first, bringing a homemade apple pie for dessert. My mother immediately took over arranging a flower centerpiece while my father settled in the living room to watch the pre-dinner football game. Emma and her husband came next with their children, who immediately asked where Uncle James was. "He's in Chicago for work," I explained, feeling a twinge of loneliness despite the house filling with people I loved. Lily arrived with a bottle of my favorite red wine and a sympathetic smile. "Flying solo tonight?" she asked quietly as she helped me in the kitchen. "Just for a few more days," I replied, not knowing how prophetic those words would be. By 7 o'clock, everyone had arrived except Andrew. I was just about to serve dinner when the doorbell rang. Andrew stood on the porch, looking uncharacteristically uncomfortable. "Sorry I'm late," he said, stepping inside and handing me a bottle of wine. "Something came up." We all settled around the table, passing dishes and pouring wine. The conversation flowed naturally. My mother talked about her garden club, Emma's husband described their recent house renovation, Lily shared an amusing courtroom anecdote. Everything was perfectly normal until my father asked Andrew about his friend's new restaurant in Miami. "It's doing really well," Andrew said, shooting me an odd glance. "Actually, that's why I was late. Jason called me earlier and, well..." He paused, setting down his fork. "Sam, isn't James supposed to be in Chicago?" The table went silent. All eyes turned to me. "Yes," I said slowly, feeling a cold knot form in my stomach. "He's there until Tuesday." "Why?" Andrew shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Jason sent me some photos from the restaurant today." "James was there, Sam. In Miami, not Chicago." "That's impossible," I laughed, though it sounded hollow even to my own ears. "You must be mistaken." "I wish I was," Andrew said gently. "But it's definitely him. He was having dinner with a woman. Blonde, probably early 30s. A colleague," I suggested immediately, though my heart was beginning to race. "He works with plenty of women." My father cleared his throat awkwardly. My mother reached across the table to squeeze my hand. Emma looked down at her plate, while her husband suddenly became very interested in refilling his wine glass. Lily, ever the practical one, turned to Andrew. "Are you absolutely certain it was James?" Andrew nodded grimly. 100%. And? He hesitated. "They didn't look like colleagues, Sam." "What's that supposed to mean?" I demanded, my voice rising slightly. "They were holding hands across the table." "He kissed her, Sam." "I'm so sorry." The room spun. I gripped the edge of the table, trying to steady myself as my family watched with concerned expressions. This couldn't be happening. There had to be an explanation. "Show me," I said finally. "Show me these photos." Andrew hesitated, then pulled out his phone. He scrolled through his messages, then handed the device to me. The images were clear despite the restaurant's dim lighting. James, my husband, sitting at a candlelit table with a stunning blonde woman I'd never seen before. Their fingers were intertwined on the table. In the next photo, he was leaning across to kiss her, his hand cupping her face in a gesture so tender it made my stomach lurch. I passed the phone back to Andrew and stood up abruptly. "Excuse me," I managed before fleeing to the kitchen. I braced myself against the counter, fighting waves of nausea and disbelief. This couldn't be real. James wouldn't do this to me. To us. Lily appeared at my side moments later, silently handing me a glass of water. "Breathe," she instructed, rubbing my back as I struggled to compose myself. "It can't be what it looks like," I whispered. "There must be an explanation." "Have you tried calling him?" Lily asked gently. I hadn't. I pulled my phone from my pocket with trembling hands and dialed James's number. It went straight to voicemail. I tried again with the same result. "He always answers when I call," I said, panic rising in my voice. "Always." By this time Emma had joined us in the kitchen. "Maybe his phone died," she suggested weakly. "Or maybe he turned it off because he's with her," I countered, surprising myself with the bitterness in my voice. We returned to the dining room, where an uncomfortable silence had fallen over my family. My father stood as I entered, his face a mask of barely contained anger. "I'll kill him," he stated simply. "Dad, no," I said, though his protective rage was strangely comforting. "Let's not jump to conclusions." "What other conclusion is there?" Andrew asked, gesturing to his phone. "He told you he was in Chicago." "He's in Miami with another woman." "He's cheating on you, Sam." The word cheating hit me like a physical blow. I sank into my chair, trying to process what was happening. For the next hour, my family debated what I should do. My father and Andrew wanted me to confront James immediately. My mother suggested waiting until I was calmer. Emma worried about public embarrassment if I made a scene. Through it all, Lily remained practical. "Don't tip him off," she advised. "If you call him now, he'll have time to construct a story. Wait until he's supposed to come home. Catch him in the lie." "But that's days away," I protested. "How am I supposed to just wait?" "Use the time," Lily said, her attorney instincts kicking in. "Check your accounts, your credit card statements. See if there's a pattern. Gather information." By the end of the evening, that's what I'd decided to do. Wait. Investigate. Confront him when he returned with evidence in hand. My family left reluctantly, each hugging me tighter than usual. Andrew offered to stay, but I declined. I needed to be alone with my thoughts. After everyone left, I stood in my too-quiet house, surrounded by half-eaten food and empty wine glasses. I picked up my phone and tried James again. Voicemail. I sent a text that betrayed nothing of what I'd learned. "Hope your meetings are going well. Everyone says hi from dinner. Love you." Then I went upstairs, curled up on my side of our bed, and stared at the ceiling until dawn, my mind spinning with questions I was afraid to answer. I called in sick to school the next morning. The thought of standing in front of 25 third graders, maintaining a cheerful facade while my personal life imploded, was impossible. My principal was understanding. In 8 years, I'd rarely taken a day off. After a sleepless night, I sat at the kitchen table nursing my third cup of coffee. James's photos from Miami burned into my mind. Around 9, my phone chimed with a text from him, "Big day of meetings. Miss you." Each word felt like a knife twisting in my chest. I didn't respond. With shaking hands, I opened my laptop and checked our joint bank account. Nothing unusual jumped out immediately: regular bills, grocery purchases, my recent haircut. Then I remembered James had set up a separate account for his business expenses about a year ago. I didn't have the login information. I moved from the kitchen to James's home office, a space I rarely entered. He kept it meticulously organized, almost sterile compared to my colorful classroom-influenced decorating style. I sat in his leather chair, feeling like an intruder in my own home. His desk drawers were unlocked. The first contained standard office supplies, pens, paper clips, sticky notes. The second held file folders labeled by month. I pulled out the most recent ones and began reading through them. The first smoking gun appeared in the form of credit card statements. While our joint card showed charges in Chicago during his supposed business trips, his personal card, statements for which were mailed to his office, not our home, told a different story. Miami hotel charges. Expensive restaurant bills for 2. A receipt for a sunset yacht cruise. All during times he'd claimed to be working in other cities. In the back of his desk drawer, I found a small jewelry box from a high-end retailer. It was empty, but the receipt tucked inside was for a white gold bracelet with a heart charm, purchased 3 months ago. I'd never received such a gift. My hands trembled as I continued searching. In a folder marked travel, I found email confirmations for flights to Miami dating back 6 months, all while he'd told me he was visiting Chicago, New York, or Atlanta. The pattern was unmistakable, and with each new piece of evidence, my denial crumbled further. Around noon, Lily came over at my request, bringing lunch I couldn't eat. I spread the evidence across the dining room table as she examined each document with her trained eye. "Let's look at your financial situation," she suggested gently. "If he's been planning this for a while, he might have been moving money." We logged into our joint savings account, and my heart sank. Regular transfers, $2,000 here, $3,000 there, had been made to an account I didn't recognize. Over the past year, nearly $50,000 had disappeared. "This is methodical," Lily observed, her professional demeanor slipping as anger crept into her voice. "He's been planning this, Sam." My phone rang, Emma calling to check on me. Her voice broke as I detailed what I'd found. "I never thought James would do something like this," she said. "He always seemed so devoted to you." "I thought so too," I whispered. After we hung up, Andrew called with his own update. "I ran a background check on the woman," he said without preamble. "Her name is Heather Montgomery. She's a real estate agent in Miami." "How did you?" I began. "I have connections," he interrupted. "Do you want to know more about her?" "Not yet," I decided. "First, I need to understand what James has been doing." After Lily left, promising to connect me with her firm's best divorce attorney just in case, I continued my investigation. I remembered our shared tablet, which we primarily used for recipes and Netflix. James occasionally used it for emails when his laptop was charging. I found it in the living room, battery nearly dead. As it charged, I opened the browser history and found something James had apparently forgotten to delete. A saved chat log with someone named Heather. The messages spanned months, becoming increasingly intimate. They discussed their future together, places they'd visit, even potential homes in Miami. In one message from just 3 weeks ago, James wrote, "Soon we won't have to hide anymore. I'm figuring out the best way to make the transition." The most devastating revelation came in a message thread from nearly a year ago, the earliest communication I could find. "I can't stop thinking about meeting you at the conference," James had written. "Dinner again tomorrow?" A year. This affair had been going on for a year, while I'd been obliviously teaching my students, maintaining our home, and waiting for my husband to return from his business trips. As the sun set, I sat surrounded by evidence of my husband's betrayal, my shock giving way to something harder and colder. The initial disbelief had transformed into white-hot anger, and beneath that, a steely determination. James hadn't just cheated, he'd constructed an elaborate double life, systematically lying to me for months while siphoning away our savings. I gathered every piece of evidence, organizing it chronologically in a folder. Then I waited for my husband to return from a trip he'd never taken, to a marriage that no longer existed. 3 days later, I heard James's key in the front door. I was sitting in the living room, the folder of evidence on the coffee table beside me, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might break through my chest. "Honey, I'm home," he called cheerfully. I heard him set down his suitcase and hang his coat in the entryway closet. A routine so normal it made my stomach turn. I didn't answer. A moment later, he appeared in the living room doorway, holding a small gift bag. "There's my beautiful wife," he smiled, looking exactly like the man I'd married, handsome, well-dressed, his dark hair slightly tousled from travel. He held out the bag. "Brought you something from Chicago." I looked at the bag but didn't take it. "How was your trip?" I asked, amazed at how steady my voice sounded. "Exhausting," he sighed, loosening his tie. "Back-to-back meetings, client dinners every night. But we landed the account, so it was worth it." He grinned, setting the gift bag on the coffee table when I made no move to take it. "How was the family dinner?" "Illuminating," I replied. Something in my tone made him pause. He studied my face, a slight furrow appearing between his brows. "Everything okay, Sam? Where were you, James?" He blinked, then laughed slightly. "Chicago, like I told you." "Why?" "That's interesting," I said, reaching for the folder beside me. "Because I have evidence that suggests otherwise." His expression changed so subtly most people would have missed it, a momentary tightening around the eyes, a slight clench of his jaw. But I'd been married to this man for 8 years. I knew every micro-expression, every tell. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his voice carefully controlled as he sat in the armchair across from me. I opened the folder and removed Andrew's photos, sliding them across the coffee table. "You weren't in Chicago, James. You were in Miami with Heather Montgomery." He stared at the photos, his face draining of color. For several seconds, he said nothing, and I could almost see the calculations happening behind his eyes as he searched for a plausible explanation. "It's not what it looks like," he finally said, using the oldest cliché in the cheater's handbook. "Really?" I pulled out the credit card statements. "Because it looks like you've been going to Miami regularly while telling me you were on business trips elsewhere. It looks like you've been charging romantic dinners and hotel rooms to your secret credit card. It looks like you bought expensive jewelry for someone who isn't your wife." With each statement, I placed another piece of evidence on the table. James's eyes darted between the documents, his confident facade crumbling. "Sam, please, I can explain." "I'm sure you can," I interrupted. "You're excellent at explaining things, at crafting narratives. That's what you do for a living, isn't it? Marketing? Creating a story people want to believe?" He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "She's a client," he tried. "An important potential client. The dinner was." "Stop lying," I shouted, my composure finally breaking. "I saw your messages, James. I know you met her at a conference last year. I know you've been planning a future with her. I know you've been moving our money into a separate account." His face hardened then, his apologetic expression replaced by something colder. "You went through my things? You invaded my privacy?" The audacity of his indignation was breathtaking. "Are you seriously trying to make me the bad guy right now? You've been having an affair and stealing our money." "I wasn't stealing," he said defensively. "I was protecting assets that I earned." That we earned, I corrected. We're married, James. Or did you forget that when you were kissing Heather in Miami? He stood abruptly, pacing the room like a caged animal. You don't understand, Sam. Our marriage hasn't been working for a long time. What are you talking about? We were happy. Were we? He challenged. Or were you just too wrapped up in your students and your perfect little teacher life to notice I was miserable? When was the last time you asked about my day and actually listened? When was the last time you initiated sex? You've been emotionally unavailable for years. His words hit like physical blows. I stood to face him, anger burning away my tears. Don't you dare blame me for your choices, I said, my voice low and dangerous. If you were unhappy, you could have talked to me. We could have gone to counseling. Instead, you lied. You cheated. You stole from me. For a moment, something like shame flickered across his face. Then he sighed dramatically, running a hand through his hair. Fine. Yes, I've been seeing Heather. But it wasn't planned, Sam. These things just happen. We connected at a conference, and it just developed. Things don't just happen, James. Affairs happen because people make choices. You chose to exchange numbers. You chose to meet her again. You chose to kiss her, to sleep with her, to plan a future with her. Every step of the way, you chose her over me, over our marriage. He looked away, unable to meet my gaze. It's not that simple. Actually, it is that simple, I countered. And it wasn't just a one-time mistake. You've been living a double life for a year, James. A year. Do you have any idea what that does to me? To know that while I was here, missing you, worrying about you working too hard, you were with her? I never meant to hurt you, he said quietly. The platitude ignited something primal within me. You never meant for me to find out. There's a difference. If Andrew's friend hadn't seen you, you'd still be lying to my face. James's eyes widened. Andrew? Your brother knows? Everyone knows, I said coldly. My entire family was here when Andrew showed me the photos. My parents, Emma, even Lily. They all know exactly what kind of man you are now. His face flushed with anger. You humiliated me in front of your family before even talking to me? You humiliated yourself. I shouted, all pretense of calm abandoned. You humiliated me. 8 years, James. 8 years I gave you. I supported your career. I loved you. I trusted you completely. And the whole time, you were just waiting for something better to come along. That's not fair, he protested weakly. No, what's not fair is building a life with someone who's secretly planning their escape. What's not fair is lying to someone's face while you empty your joint savings account. What's not fair is making me question every memory, every moment of our marriage. I was crying now, tears of rage and heartbreak streaming down my face. James tried to approach me, but I backed away. Don't touch me, I warned. Don't you dare touch me. Sam, please, he pleaded, his own eyes wet. I made a terrible mistake. We can work through this. I'll end things with Heather. I'll go to counseling. Whatever it takes. I stared at him, truly seeing him for perhaps the first time. This man who could lie so effortlessly, who could pivot from denial to blame to contrition in the span of a single conversation. Get out, I said quietly. What? Get out of this house. I can't even look at you right now. This is my house too, he argued. A house you were planning to leave, I reminded him. A house you've been stealing money from. A house where you've been lying to your wife while planning a future with another woman. We stared at each other across the living room, two people who had once promised to love each other forever, now virtual strangers. Fine, he said finally. I'll go to a hotel tonight. But this conversation isn't over, Sam. We have a lot to figure out. The only thing I need to figure out, I replied, is how I didn't see who you really were until now. James grabbed his coat and keys, pausing at the doorway. I do love you, Sam. Despite everything, I do. No, James, I said, suddenly exhausted. You love yourself. You always have. The door closed behind him, and I collapsed onto the couch, my body racked with sobs. For hours, I cried, for the marriage I thought I had, for the future I'd planned, for the man I'd believed James to be. Around midnight, I called Lily, who arrived 30 minutes later with an overnight bag and a bottle of wine. She held me while I experienced what felt like a panic attack, struggling to breathe through the tightness in my chest. I can't believe this is happening, I gasped between sobs. I know, Lily soothed, stroking my hair. But you're going to get through this. And you're not alone. As dawn broke, I finally fell into an exhausted sleep on the couch, Lily keeping watch in the armchair beside me. My last thought before unconsciousness claimed me was the realization that I would not chase after James. For the first time in our relationship, he would have to face the consequences of his actions without me smoothing the way. The week following James's departure was a blur of grief, rage, and disbelief. He tried calling repeatedly the first day, then switched to text messages when I wouldn't answer. We need to talk. Please give me a chance to explain. This isn't all my fault, Sam. At least tell me where I can pick up some clothes. I finally responded to the last one, informing him he could come by when I was at work. I left a suitcase of his things on the porch. He took it, and left behind another Chicago souvenir and a handwritten letter of apology I tore up without reading. Lily connected me with her colleague Howard, one of the top divorce attorneys in Boston. During our initial consultation, I laid out everything I'd discovered. He's been systematically moving money, Howard observed, reviewing the financial documents. That's not going to look good for him in court. I don't care about the money, I said truthfully. I just want this over with. Howard fixed me with a stern look. With all due respect, Mrs. Wilson, you should care about the money. Your husband has been diverting marital assets while planning to leave you. Don't let him get away with that on top of everything else. Under Howard's guidance, I documented every financial transaction I could find and gathered all evidence of James's affair. Meanwhile, a support system formed around me. My parents brought home-cooked meals and helped with practical matters like changing the locks and security codes. Emma took me shopping for new bedding. I couldn't bear to sleep on the sheets James and I had shared. Andrew installed a security camera system just in case and insisted on staying over the first weekend. My school principal was understanding when I explained the situation, offering me additional time off if needed. I declined. My students provided a welcome distraction from my collapsing personal life. My colleagues covered my recess duty and after-school meetings, giving me space to attend legal appointments. As the initial shock subsided, I began learning disturbing details about the extent of James's deception. Howard's financial investigator discovered James had been maintaining a separate address in Boston, a small apartment downtown he apparently used between business trips. The money trail revealed he'd been financing Heather's lifestyle, paying for shopping sprees, spa days, and weekend getaways. Most painfully, I discovered through social media that James and Heather weren't exactly hiding their relationship. Her Instagram account, which I found through some basic searching, contained numerous photos from their travels, carefully cropped or angled to hide James's face, but unmistakably him. In one caption from 3 months earlier, she referred to her Jay and how they were making plans for forever. While I'd been teaching third graders and maintaining our home, my husband had been constructing an entirely separate life. The level of calculation was staggering. Each discovery was like reopening a wound just as it began to heal. A particularly difficult moment came when I found a document on our shared cloud storage, a list of properties in Miami that James had been researching. The file's metadata showed he'd created it shortly after our last anniversary. While we'd been celebrating 8 years together, he'd been planning his escape. My mother came over one evening and found me surrounded by printouts of these properties, sobbing uncontrollably. I don't understand, I cried as she held me. How could he do this? How could he look me in the eye every day and lie? Some people, my mother said carefully, can compartmentalize in ways others can't. It's not a reflection on you, Samantha. But 8 years, Mom. Did any of it mean anything to him? She stroked my hair, just as she had when I was a child. I believe it did. But somewhere along the way, he lost sight of what matters. He chose the excitement of something new over the commitment he made to you. I feel so stupid, I confessed. Everyone saw the signs but me. You weren't stupid, she corrected firmly. You were trusting. There's a difference. You believed in your marriage, in the promises you made to each other. That doesn't make you naive, it makes you a person of integrity. Those words became a lifeline in the dark days that followed. I wasn't stupid, I was a person of integrity. I hadn't failed, James had chosen to break his promises. 2 weeks after the confrontation, I decided it was time to reclaim my space. With Lily and Emma's help, I changed the locks and security system on the house. We moved furniture, rearranged decorations, and removed photos of James. It wasn't about erasing him, that would be impossible, but about creating an environment that didn't remind me of his betrayal at every turn. James's response was swift and angry. You can't just lock me out of my own house, he texted. I can and I did, I replied. If you need something, have your attorney contact mine. He tried a different approach. I miss you, Sam. I made a terrible mistake. Can we please just talk? I didn't respond. Howard had advised me to minimize direct communication, and I was finally starting to understand why. Every interaction with James left me emotionally drained and confused. Meanwhile, James was attempting to control the narrative among our friends. Some reported he was telling people we were taking a break due to communication issues. Others heard we were divorcing because I was unwilling to work on the marriage. A few loyal friends forwarded me his messages, where he portrayed himself as remorseful and me as unforgiving. The most difficult period was a stretch of days when depression hit me like a physical weight. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on lesson plans or grade papers. I moved through my house like a ghost, wondering if I would ever feel normal again. But even in those darkest moments, I never once considered taking James back. The systematic nature of his betrayal, the calculated deception over such a long period, these weren't the actions of someone who had made a mistake. They were the actions of someone who had made thousands of consecutive choices to betray me, day after day, for an entire year. As 1 month of separation approached, I was beginning to see the faintest glimmer of light ahead. Not happiness, not yet, but perhaps the possibility of it somewhere in the future. I was surviving. And someday, I might even thrive again. 2 weeks after our confrontation, James texted asking to meet. Howard advised against it, but after days of persistent messages, I reluctantly agreed to dinner at a neutral restaurant. I told myself it was to get closure, but a small, wounded part of me still wanted explanations only James could provide. I arrived at the upscale Italian restaurant to find James already seated, looking handsome in a blue button-down that I'd bought him last Christmas. He stood when he saw me, his expression a careful mixture of hope and contrition. You look beautiful, he said as I sat across from him. What do you want, James? I asked, ignoring the compliment. He sighed, reaching for the wine bottle the server had already opened. May I? He asked, gesturing to my empty glass. I nodded, and he poured the Cabernet I'd always favored. I want to talk about us, he said, his voice gentle. About fixing what I broke. I took a sip of wine, using the moment to compose myself. I'm not sure that's possible. Please, Sam. Just hear me out. He leaned forward, his eyes, those eyes I'd once found so trustworthy, pleading with me. What I did was inexcusable. The affair, the lies. I got caught up in something that felt exciting and new, and I lost sight of what really matters. And what's that? I asked coldly. You. Us. Our life together. He reached across the table for my hand, but I pulled away. I've ended things with Heather completely. I'm seeing a therapist to understand why I made such destructive choices. I'll do whatever it takes: marriage counseling, complete financial transparency, and open phone policy. The server appeared to take our orders. James requested our usual appetizers, clearly trying to evoke nostalgia for happier times. I ordered a simple salad, doubting I could eat even that. The thing is, James, I said once we were alone again, even if you've ended things with Heather, how could I ever trust you again? You lied to me for a year. A year. You looked me in the eye day after day and lied. People make mistakes, Sam. Even terrible ones. Isn't our marriage worth fighting for? I studied him, trying to see past the practiced sincerity to the man beneath. That's just it. I'm not sure what our marriage actually was. Was any of it real? Or was I just a convenient home base while you explored your options? Of course it was real, he insisted, looking wounded. I loved you, I still love you. Heather was a fantasy, an escape. It wasn't real. It was real enough for you to steal our savings, I pointed out. Real enough to research homes in Miami. He had the grace to look ashamed. I got carried away. But I've transferred all the money back to our joint account. Every penny. And I'm willing to sign a post-nuptial agreement giving you financial protection. As he continued outlining his plan for reconciliation, I felt a strange detachment, as if I were watching a skilled actor perform. The James across from me was saying all the right things, making all the right promises. But how many times had he lied just as convincingly? Our food arrived, and James transitioned to reminiscing about our early days together, our first date at this very restaurant, the weekend trips to Cape Cod, the plans we'd made. Despite myself, I felt a pang of grief for the life I thought we'd had. We can have that again, Sam, he said, noticing my softening expression. We can rebuild, better than before. For a brief, wavering moment, I considered it. The path of reconciliation would certainly be easier in some ways: no divorce proceedings, no selling the house, no explaining to everyone why my marriage had failed. And beneath the anger and betrayal, a small part of me still loved the man I thought James had been. As I sat there, torn between self-preservation and the pull of our shared history, my phone rang. An unknown number. I would normally have ignored it, but something, intuition, perhaps, made me answer. Is this Samantha Wilson? A woman's voice asked. Yes, who's calling? My name is Heather Montgomery. I think we need to talk. The restaurant seemed to fade around me as I processed her words. James, seeing my expression, whispered urgently, who is it? I held up a hand, silencing him. How did you get my number, Heather? James's face drained of color. I found it in James's phone, she replied. I'm sorry to call like this, but I just found out he's married. To you. He told me he was divorced. My eyes locked with James's across the table. When did you find this out? Today, Heather said, her voice trembling slightly. He's been staying with me in Miami for the past 2 weeks. He said he was relocating for work, that we were starting our life together. Then I saw your text about the divorce attorney. 2 weeks. The exact time since our confrontation. Not only had James not ended things with Heather as he'd just claimed, he'd been living with her. He's sitting across from me right now, I said, watching James's panicked expression. At a restaurant, telling me he ended things with you weeks ago. There was a shocked silence on the line. He told me he was at a work dinner, Heather finally said. I laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. Apparently, he's lying to both of us. I'd like to meet, Heather said after a moment. If you're willing. I think we both deserve the truth. I agreed to meet her the following day and ended the call, staring at James, who was now ashen-faced and speechless. You haven't changed at all, I said quietly. You're still lying, still manipulating, still playing both sides. Sam, I can explain. Don't bother. I stood, throwing my napkin on the table. I'm done listening to your explanations. As I turned to leave, James grabbed my wrist. Please, don't go. Don't meet with her. She's unstable, obsessed with me. I jerked my arm free. The only unstable person here is you, James. Living in a fantasy world where you can have everything you want without consequences. I walked out of the restaurant, my head held high despite the curious glances from other diners. In the parking lot, I took deep breaths of the cool evening air, feeling something shift inside me, a clarity I hadn't experienced since this nightmare began. The next day, I met Heather at a coffee shop halfway between Boston and Miami. She'd flown in specifically to meet me. She was as beautiful as her photos, but her eyes were red-rimmed from crying. We spent 3 hours comparing notes, filling in the gaps in each other's understanding of who James really was. She showed me text messages where he promised her a future together, real estate listings they'd viewed, even a ring he'd bought her last month. All while attempting his reconciliation campaign with me. I shared the evidence of his financial deception and the extent of his lies about his whereabouts. I feel so stupid, Heather said, echoing my own earlier words to my mother. We both believed what we wanted to believe, I replied, feeling an unexpected kinship with this woman who'd unknowingly participated in the destruction of my marriage. He's very good at telling people exactly what they want to hear. We were still talking when James burst into the coffee shop, his face contorted with anger. What the hell is this? He demanded, looking between us. This, I said calmly, is the end of your manipulation. You had no right to contact each other, he hissed, lowering his voice as other patrons turned to stare. Actually, we had every right, Heather countered, standing to face him. You're the one with no rights here, James. No right to lie to us, to make promises you never intended to keep. I loved you both, he tried, his tone softening to the persuasive cadence I'd heard so often. In different ways. I was confused, trying to figure things out. Save it, I said, gathering my purse. We've compared notes, James. We know exactly who you are now. As if on cue, Andrew walked into the coffee shop. I'd asked him to come as a precaution, unsure how James might react if he discovered Heather and I had connected. Everything okay here? He asked, his eyes hard as he looked at James. We're just leaving, I said, nodding to Heather, who grabbed her coat. James stepped in front of me. This isn't over, Sam. You can't just throw away 8 years. I didn't throw anything away, I replied, my voice steady. You did. Every time you lied, every time you saw her, every time you stole from our future to finance your double life. What about forgiveness? He pleaded, sensing he was losing control of the situation. What about for better or worse? I looked at him. Really looked at him, and felt the last threads of attachment finally snap. This isn't a worse moment, James. This is who you are. And I deserve better. Andrew placed a protective hand on my shoulder as Heather and I walked past James, whose face had crumpled into genuine despair, not because he'd hurt us, I realized, but because his carefully constructed world was collapsing. Outside, Heather and I exchanged contact information, promising to keep each other updated on James's inevitable attempts to rewrite history. Then we hugged, an awkward but sincere embrace between two women who had loved and been betrayed by the same man. Good luck, she said. I hope you find someone worthy of you. You too, I replied, meaning it. As Andrew drove me home, I finally broke down completely, sobbing until I could barely breathe. But unlike the hopeless tears I'd shed in previous weeks, these felt cleansing, cathartic, the final release of something poisonous I'd been carrying. I'm proud of you, Sam, Andrew said as he walked me to my door. That took incredible strength. I don't feel strong, I admitted. That's the thing about strength, he replied. You don't have to feel it to have it. That night, alone in the house that no longer felt like a home filled with lies, I slept deeply for the first time since discovering James's betrayal. The worst had happened, I had faced it, and I had survived. Everything that followed would be rebuilding. 6 months after that fateful family dinner, I stood in my new apartment, surrounded by moving boxes. The divorce had been finalized last week, faster than expected due to the overwhelming evidence of James's infidelity and financial deception. Howard had been ruthless but effective, securing me a settlement that included the house, which I promptly sold, half of our investments, and additional compensation for the money James had diverted. The apartment was smaller than the house, but it was mine. A third-floor unit in a renovated Victorian with bay windows, hardwood floors, and no memories of James. The walls were painted in colors I'd chosen, decorated with art I loved, furnished with a mix of new pieces and sentimental items from my pre-James life that my parents had stored in their attic. The divorce process had been surprisingly civil in the end. After the coffee shop confrontation, James seemed to deflate, offering little resistance to my terms. Through our attorneys, I learned he had moved to Miami permanently, though according to Heather, with whom I still occasionally exchanged texts, their relationship had imploded within weeks of our meeting. Apparently, without the thrill of secrecy and deception, James found their connection less compelling. My professional life had taken an unexpected turn for the better. A prestigious private school across town had offered me a position with higher pay, smaller classes, and more curricular freedom. After 8 years at the same elementary school, the change had been intimidating, but it proved to be exactly what I needed: new colleagues, new challenges, new surroundings unmarked by sympathy glances and whispered conversations. Therapy had been essential to my healing process. Weekly sessions with Dr. Patterson helped me process not just the betrayal, but my own fears of having somehow caused or deserved it. Infidelity reflects the choices of the unfaithful partner, she reminded me often. Not the worth of the betrayed. My support network remained steadfast. My parents called daily during the worst periods, tapering to a more manageable weekly dinner as I stabilized. Emma invited me on family outings with her children, who provided the kind of uncomplicated love only kids can offer. Andrew checked my apartment's security system monthly, gradually relaxing his protective vigilance as it became clear James had truly moved on. Lily, whose initial "I told you so" had gone mercifully unsaid, helped me navigate the legal complexities and emotional landmines of divorce. "You're handling this better than 90% of my clients," she observed one evening over wine. "Most people either collapse or go scorched earth." "I did both," I reminded her. "Just at different times." Perhaps the most unexpected development was the support group I started for others dealing with infidelity. What began as an informal gathering of 3 women I'd met through online forums had grown to bi-weekly meetings of 15 people, men and women of various ages and backgrounds, united by the common experience of betrayal. "You're good at this," one participant told me after I facilitated a particularly difficult discussion. "You should have been a therapist." "I'm just a few steps ahead on the same path," I replied, though the comment planted a seed I was beginning to nurture. The possibility of returning to school, perhaps for counseling or social work. My family decided to celebrate my birthday with a weekend trip to a lakeside cabin in Vermont. As we sat around a bonfire, my parents, siblings, nieces, and nephews roasting marshmallows and sharing stories, Emma nudged me gently. "You seem good," she observed. "Better than good, actually." "I am," I realized, somewhat surprised by the truth of it. "Not every day, but most days." "I have someone I want you to meet," she began tentatively. "A colleague of Paul's. Nice guy, divorced, no drama." "Thanks, but I'm not ready," I said, finding no need to elaborate. Emma squeezed my hand in understanding. The truth was, I was enjoying my rediscovered independence. I was reconnecting with friends James had subtly isolated me from, pursuing interests he had dismissed, and learning to trust my own instincts again. Dating seemed like an unnecessary complication in a life that was finally finding its balance. Back at school after the birthday weekend, I found myself truly engaged with my students for the first time since the divorce proceedings began. My third graders were working on personal narratives, and as I moved among their desks, offering guidance and encouragement, I felt a familiar spark, the pure joy of teaching that had originally drawn me to education. "Ms. Wilson," called Matthew, a serious boy with glasses too large for his face, "is this good?" I read his story about learning to ride a bike despite his fear of falling. It's excellent, I told him. You've shown how brave you were to try again after getting hurt. Like you, he said matter-of-factly. What do you mean? I asked, surprised. My mom says you're brave because you started over after something bad happened. She says you're teaching us it's okay to be sad but not to give up. I blinked back unexpected tears. Your mom is very kind. That evening, I found a letter in my faculty mailbox. A thank you note from Matthew's mother, detailing how her son had been struggling with his parents' separation until he joined my class. You've shown him resilience in action, she wrote. Sometimes the best teaching happens without words. At home, I placed the letter on my refrigerator, a tangible reminder that our hardest experiences can become unexpected gifts to others. I thought of James, wondering if he'd found whatever he'd been searching for in Miami, in Heather, in the constant pursuit of more. I realized with mild surprise that I no longer cared. His choices had stopped defining my life. 6 months earlier, I couldn't imagine surviving the humiliation and heartbreak of James's betrayal. Now, I couldn't imagine returning to the marriage that had confined me to a smaller version of myself, the trusting wife who ignored red flags, who accommodated her husband's increasing absences, who measured her worth by his approval. The journey wasn't over. I still had moments of anger, days of doubt, occasional dreams where James and I were still together, still happy. But those moments no longer derailed me. They were just weather passing through the broader climate of my life, a life that was increasingly shaped by my own choices rather than someone else's deception. As I prepared for bed that night, I caught my reflection in the mirror, a woman I was still getting to know. Stronger than she appeared. Braver than she believed. Worthy of a love that didn't require constant vigilance or compromise of her dignity. You're going to be okay, I told her softly. And for the first time since Andrew had shown me those photos from Miami, I completely believed it. Sometimes, the most devastating betrayals clear the path to our truest selves. Sometimes, what feels like an ending is actually the beginning of something far more authentic and fulfilling. And sometimes, losing what you thought you wanted leads you directly to what you truly need. Thank you for joining me on this journey of heartbreak and healing. If you've experienced betrayal, know that you're not alone and that recovery is possible, one day at a time. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had to rebuild after betrayal? What helped you move forward? Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of resilience, and share this with someone who might need to hear that better days are ahead. Remember, your worth is never determined by someone else's inability to see it.